Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Ash, and this week on OnReviewCast, we're going to be looking at Interview with a Vampire, episode 3.
AMC series Interview with a Vampire, season 1, episode 3.
So, yeah, guys, back to the podcast. Welcome. For all you listeners out there, before we get started, I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of the Patreon that we do basically have up for OnReviewCast. Go to OnReviewCast, Patreon/@OnReviewCast. Help us continue to rock here. Our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter, you know, all the whole deal. And our YouTube. Make sure you watch those videos and give us a like, guys. Give us a subscribe. And, you know, interact with us. Like, we want to know what you guys think about these amazing series that we're going to be covering and reviewing as we go along here. Episode composition courtesy of the website Fandom. This episode is entitled "Is My Very Nature That of a Devil?" It's written by Roland James and Hannah Muscovich, and directed by Keith Powell, and air date was October 16th. Synopsis reads: tension begins to mount in all areas of Louis' world, his romantic relationship, his human family, and his business interests. A shocking act of violence leads to the most profound decision of his life. This particular episode, guys, was definitely, I think this one was a strong one. But not as strong, definitely not as strong as a pilot, but it was more like complex in terms of, I guess, like plot progression, in terms of pacing too, of the actual overall story. Yeah, so the episode basically starts off with, it's funny because it actually starts off with something so simple as Louis and Lestat, they're in the quarter of this park, and they're of Louisiana, and they're in the middle of this park, and Louis is reading a book, and Lestat is just trying to, I feel like once again, trying to almost kind of ghost him into getting him to embrace his nature of debauchery and, you know, embracing that lifestyle of what he is, which is the vampire. Yeah. And as they're reading this book, Louis is trying to persuade Lestat. I also right off the bat, actually, we still see, even from like last episode, we were talking about contrasts. And besides the fact that they're for this version of Lestat, because I actually, you know what's funny? I looked up Lestat and Louis in I think it was the 1990s version or whatever it is, the previous version of Interview with a Vampire, the movie, and definitely some things have changed. Definitely in terms of race, they were two white dudes. They weren't necessarily an interracial gay couple, from what I understand, or from what the pictures anyway. I just looked at the pictures, but anyway, yeah, it's pretty interesting right off the bat. Besides, you know, that contrast of like different races of, you know, he's from Louisiana and he's from they didn't have to particularly say, but I'm assuming some kind of like he's a French white. So he's from France. He's French. He's a French vampire. Anyway, despite that, like, contrast, we see more contrast, those differences. We see more contrast happening within Louis and Lestat in terms of like the way, how they decided to go about their immortality and how they wanted to go about their progression of vampirism, and they're continuing their lifestyle. And we see that Louis is trying to get Lestat to see a different way. He's trying to get him to see the way of the vampire as like, oh, you know, and maybe we are more than just killing machines. You know, we're more than just these things that are placed on this earth for eternity to just cause debauchery and go on about and cause and wreak havoc, you know. Maybe we're more than that. And I can kind of see how he is kind of, it's natural for someone, you know, to think that way, or for him to think that way. I mean, despite given his, you know, spiritual aspects and spiritual background from when he was a human, I mean, he's probably just like bored of the whole thing already, of, you know, being a vampire, hunting or whatever it is. So he decides to come up with this idea of like, okay, like, hey, let's maybe we want to kill bad people. Maybe we want to kill the really, really bad ones. So they go about the town and they start looking for they start hunting people of the most, well, they read their minds to determine their, I guess to kind of judge them, which is kind of fucked up if you kind of think about it. Because like, you know, you might be thinking in your worst moment, you know, or your worst like, having a bad day. You know, you're having a bad day and just thinking about things in your worst moment or whatever it is. And these two vampires who just so happen to hear this one thought and be like, oh, I'm gonna kill that guy. Like when you're just angry, you're just upset. You didn't really mean it. You just got mad. You didn't say anything with any conviction in your heart when you said that in your head. So yeah. But this episode we get to see Antoinette. Yeah, Antoinette. She's a jazz singer at the lounge that Louis basically owns, and immediately it looks good. Well, at least let me know what you guys think. But like immediately to me, like it seems like Lestat and Louis have. Lestat has fallen for her in terms of like he is definitely interested in like her looks and being maybe pursuing her like right off the bat. You can tell like some kind of something was going to happen between her. But anyway, the first time we meet her, she's actually singing, and they go on debating about being the differences of how they choose to spend their existence, or how they choose to be a vampire, different kind of vampire. Oh yeah, by the way, that guy they actually something that I thought was actually funny and kind of speaks to like Louis' nature was that like. It's funny because it's his idea. It's like, okay, let's try this. Let's try finding the worst human beings and like, let's try like eating them. And when Lestat actually, it's funny because I'm picking up on things. When Lestat actually goes along with this and he actually does it, he's actually like, okay, yeah, cool. Let's do that. He's kind of like, when he does it, and he finds like he's like, what about him? No, what about him? No. And when I actually find a guy that Louis actually approves of, he holds him down. He's like, okay, yeah, feed, like go ahead and eat, drink his blood or whatever. And instead of actually doing it, which is Louis' idea, by the way, instead of actually doing it and following through with it, he actually decides or opts to eat a nearby cat. Which is kind of like, I don't know, you can imagine someone just like eating a cheese, how I viewed it was like these couples at a restaurant. It's like, oh, what do you want to eat? And it's like, oh, or someone, you know how it is with your partner. You're like, oh, what do you want to eat? You're like, I don't know, what do you want to eat or whatever it is. And like, I can't decide what I want for food. We can't decide what we're landing on dinner. That old joke. But like, and then when the person actually decides, they're like, okay, I got you this cheeseburger. You said you wanted cheeseburgers. I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't know. Maybe I want cheeseburgers. Like, all right, got you this cheeseburger. You said you wanted a cheeseburger. Here you go. Here's a cheeseburger. Now go ahead and eat. And the person just looks at the cheeseburger and slaps it on the other person's hand. And it's like, and then picks it and like takes out a banana from their back pocket. That's the analogy. It's like, get this fucking cheeseburger out of here. Get this fucking cheeseburger out of here. I got a banana. It's kind of like, well, what the fuck? You said you wanted a cheeseburger. That's my analogy for basically that scene. And I thought that was so funny. How that happened. It's kind of like, I mean, it's funny because like Lestat didn't react to it, but Lestat was just kind of like, okay, yeah, like whatever. But like I feel like that's how it would have been. And I watched it and I was like, well, what the fuck? You set up this scenario. You wanted us to like do this in this way. And then when it came down to our time to actually do this, you were kind of like, oh no, that's fine. No. Anyway, just very, very, definitely very, very odd. Yeah, and it's something interesting in this episode too is that Louis makes the decision to not to kill anymore. He says like, he doesn't want to do it anymore. It's not for him. which is, I mean, fine, I guess. But Lestat doesn't honestly look too happy about it. But I feel like in that moment, he's kind of like more or less focused on Antoinette and the things that and going on with her. And then he has a back and forth with this piano guy, of course. And the whole line about the wet dick singer. That was a good line. That line stayed with me. That was just like funny. It's like how. So what that scene was all about was just basically to show that like Lestat is a artist or an appreciation, a person who appreciates arts from all aspects. Because he calls out the pianist and he's kind of like, yo, the pianist is playing blah blah notes all over. He's saying something repetitive within this jazz lounge setting. He's like, and Lestat, being the French white that he is, gets him. Is like kind of like, all right, let me show you. And he speaks to the troops because I guess this is a time right in the 1910s when America was at war with like kind of like the English, and around that time, and when he sits down, he's like, for the boys who's going to be shipped off to Europe, know thy enemy, and he sits down and he starts to play this very European like classical music piece or whatever it is, and everybody. What's funny about that, I think, what I enjoyed about that was kind of like, what I really enjoyed was kind of like the second he's ass played it, you can hear like, it's like a typical like fucking like black person in the background. It's kind of like, oh, hell no. It's like, oh, hell no. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, hell no. The second they heard that like classical, like that motif of like those notes moving in that way, they were like, no, that's not the place for this. I thought that was like, that was funny. Because like Louis before even playing Louis, because I don't think even Louis was suspecting that he's probably gonna play like that kind of classical music, but like Louis is like, this ain't your music, this ain't your kind of music, bruh. And like Lestat just pushes him off, and he charges towards the piano anyway. He starts playing that tune, and that's when they were like, oh, hell no. Oh, anyway, it's funny. Oh, hell no. Anyway, so he starts playing, and he's like, and the band pianist is like making fun of him. He's like, sounds like a motif of some musical piece written by someone who's never gotten his dick wet. Just like, oh, the debauchery, the uncivilness, craziness of this scenario. And I feel like this is a very real scenario, even though they're playing in the 1910s, but Lestat eventually starts, that's actually showing his musicianship actually a little bit. He starts playing in a different style of like, kind of like the Joplin series of like, like Peanuts, if you're familiar with Joplin. And it's like, like he starts playing, I forget what the original tune of dun 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 dun. I forget what that original classical tune is called, but he starts playing that in more like a pinnacle jazzy kind of way, and everybody's like starts to get over it, and then they start like feeling, they're like, oh yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's when they started to like really start jamming, and the pianist goes back to actually joining him on the piano. Very interesting, very real interesting, very real and very interesting perspective of, I think, again, showing contrast between two different worlds of the French and of the Louisiana Americas. That was actually kind of cool. To show that we're all different, and that was awesome. You know what? It was an awesome scene. That was a beautiful scene. And guys, you can tell me in the comments if you agree with me or not. Like, that was such an awesome scene because, like, when he started, when he started playing, everybody just when it got again, hell no, oh hell no, that line. When he started playing, they disliked it clearly. But when he started playing in their style, they liked it. This just proves, and I'll always stand by this, that like music brings people together. Music and people. You might speak a ton of different languages. None of them, me and you might not be speaking the same language. We might not be speaking English. We might be speaking Japanese. You might speak Japanese. I might only speak English. I might only speak Spanish. You only speak Creole or whatever it is. But you know what sounds the same in each language? Sound. Music sounds the same in each language. An A note sounds the same in each language. A B note sounds the same, and the sound the same in each language. Universal language, man. Music, and it connects us in a way that is on a level that's just, it transcends our consciousness of communications or our capabilities of what we perceive as communication. But again, more hippie speak from Ash. I know. Okay, all right. So let's get back to the episode. This actually prompts Daniel, we flash forward actually, to the present day of what is actually happening when Louise telling this story. And this actually prompts Daniel's question of saying that, hey, wait a minute, Lestat wrote this piece. He was the one that wrote this famous jazz piece, or he was the one that inspired this famous jazz piece. And Louis says, that's the one. That's the thing that that's the piece that was basically inspired. He wrote this piece or whatever it is. He pulls it up on the computer and he starts listening to it. And he tells him that it kind of like with some kind of like a little bit of skepticism in his voice. And I think at this junction of the episode, he starts to question his validity of the story of him being, what he was to Lestat and what Lestat exactly was to him. Because I think it's interesting because he had some recordings that were, I guess, previously done from before, and I know that this is kind of like this series is kind of like almost like a kind of continuing kind of thing, a very long outside the realms of like this universe kind of thing. But this scene was basically him trying to say like embrace the truth or whatever it is, and he admits to maybe embellishing the truth or changing the story for the dramatics previously in the previous interviews that he's done or with Daniel, or he's been doing with Daniel, I guess, to dramatize the story to make it a greater deal than it actually I think was. And I think that he said this because, or he did this because he wanted to make to gain more followers or to gain more recognition of the things that he was basically doing. To gain more focus on the actual realistic story that he was actually telling Daniel now, rather than the ones of the past. But something that was interesting about this, or something that I noticed about this scene, was that like he was basically in the end he was kind of telling him like, I was like, okay, like all those other interviews or all those the information that you got before, the interviews that we did before was basically bullshit. And Daniel was like, okay. And he's like, but this is the real story. This is the real thing that I'm giving you now. Basically, Louis telling Daniel this. And Daniel's kind of like, okay, like we'll start over. And he throws the tapes in the garbage, I guess, of the previously recorded interviews with him on it. And Louis looks at it and he uses his vampire powers. Again, I did not know, apparently vampires have pyrokinesis now too. Like, I don't know. This is another power that I think that's new to me. I've never really necessarily seen, and we know that vampires can do all kind of crazy weird stuff. Particularly, I suppose in this series, like the whole flying thing we talked about in like episode 1. Again, I'll stand by it. Vampires flying are weird. But anyway, we are talking about pyrokinesis and how he just looked at it. It's funny because he just kind of looked at it and it burst into flames. That was I don't know. I've never seen that shit before. It was very, very odd. And also something we talked about last time too is we talked about. We said that like we gotta remember that this interview or the story that we're actually watching and that whole passage, that passage that back and forth between Daniel and Louis I spoke of before. You gotta remember that this is from Louis' perspective. I mean, things. He says that this is the way it is or whatever it is, and I guess if you think about it, like 1910s to like 2022, when this was and the apparent interview is supposed to be taking place, the things change, memories change. I can't even tell you what I ate for breakfast like 2 weeks ago. I can't specifically. Well, I probably could tell you. Well, I can vaguely guess, but I can't exactly tell you because my diet's probably, it's relatively the same. Keep a concept. But anyway, I can't relatively tell you the exact shirt or what I was wearing or what I did that day. I can't tell you those things. Those things might get foggy and messed up and you might miscommunicate certain things. And we see that actually later on in the episode too, is that he can't necessarily remember the exact details of it. So I don't know, like it's now it begins to throw this blanket of don't take everything word for word via these characters that we're particularly being introduced to and the actions that they're doing. Do it with a grain of salt because they are coming from someone from the account that is this old and they don't necessarily remember every particular thing the way exactly that it happened. So anyway, back at the Lestat's place, Antoinette and Lestat, like we all knew and thought, are getting kind of closer and closer. And at this point, like Louis has now decided not to kill anymore. He's only feeding off of animals, and now he is watching his lover Lestat be enchanted by this woman, and etc. And yeah, and he describes it as like he kind of understood, but like you can see it in his face with the whole as she's basically like flirting with him and like it's basically all over him. Like it bothers Louis. You can tell that it bothers Louis. It definitely bothers him, and like understandably so. If you were with someone and you were happy with them, even though your libido isn't up, like even he, like how he admitted he isn't like as strong and he's in as as gung-ho as he used to be, he still has these feelings and etc. for Lestat, and it can tell basically it bothers him. But these two basically start going out of there, what the fuck, and Louis steps out and he goes about his business, and a scene cuts and they decide to show Lestat by the burner, and but basically a body's being burned, and Louis assumes that it's Antoinette, but it is not. It's actually a dentist, because apparently there's a dentist convention in town or whatever it is. Cool, great, whatever. But the significance of that was that, I mean, they've killed everyone that they've ever probably, or so far, because like remember the first hooker that they were with, Miss, I forget her name now, but the first, how they met, the girl who they shared with, they had a threesome with, he killed her in a second. Like that was obviously like basically like, okay, like yeah, like they did that thing now, and she's seen a lot of things, or she's being close with them, but now like it's over, they murdered, like one and done. Lestat uses people, he uses them, he has sex with them, and that's it, like, and he kills them. But with Antoinette, he left her alive, And the basic fact that it was bothering Louis, because Louis in that situation with that other girl who they met over, Miss Lily, that's what her name is. So Miss Lily, they are having a whole great time together, but the difference is that this time it was just Lestat and Antoinette, and Louis wasn't necessarily involved in that. And I don't think that he was a part of that whole. It was a twosome, it wasn't a threesome, if you know what I mean. So they were more or less involved with. They were more or less involved with one another, and he was left out of it. And something that's actually heartbreaking is that during this whole burner scene is that Louis looks at Lestat and he's kind of like, well, aren't I enough for you? Aren't I enough? Isn't it enough for you to just kind of be with me? And Lestat just basically burst out laughing. And Louis don't laugh. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys have ever been with someone that's just you tell them exactly how you feel. Because obviously, again, it bothers this dude. It bothers him that they are together, they're spending all this time together, whatever it is. It actually genuinely bothers him, you can tell. And he's trying to express that to him. And he essentially laughs in his face and laughs at his feelings. But Louis, I guess shakes it off. He's kind of yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? And I guess now they have established an arrangement. And I counted it, by the way, where Louis says that, so I can go ahead and fuck whoever I want. And Lestat says, of course. Yes, totally. Yeah, well, he says, of course. The answer was, of course. He says this 5 times. 5 times. Obviously, I don't care if you're gay, straight, or whatever. No, just no. It's not gonna... If you are in a relationship, it's not gonna work. If it's a man or a woman or whatever it is you liking or whatever, dude, it's not gonna he said it 5 times. Of course, yeah, it's fine. Of course. And he only said that because he did it. You know what I mean? Fuck off, really. I think because he wanted to get away with it, but because the second that came out of his mouth is I could fuck whoever I want. We all knew what he was thinking. He started to think about it. And he was like, oh, hell no. Sorry, guys. I had to. That was great. That was so great. I had to. That was wonderful. Anyway, oh man. So cut to forward a couple scenes, and Louis is playing cards, and he gets a message from the outside to say that there's someone to basically see him before the card game, before the guy comes in to talk to one of the mistresses, the same mistresses who in the beginning who the guy was trying to do some butt stuff to, and it was just anyway, but and the mistress is kind of I don't know, it's the whole vernacular of talking about how she's a woman or something like that, and she's like, oh, don't take offense to me calling you a woman, and she's in the process just oh no, I've been called a cunny, a cow, and a something else, and then you want to call me a woman? That's not, I might as well marry you or something like that. You're so fucking so sweet to me. I was this, again, the way that this is written, man, it's written, and the way that they give their performances for the 1910s of, 1910s Mississippi Southern kind of deal. It's definitely 110%. It's very authentic, like I've mentioned before. It's very natural the way that they do it, and they're so in it. That's the kind of actors that they basically are. Yeah, it's really, really good. Yeah. So the guy shows up, the gentleman, I want to say, well, one of the mistresses goes to get Louis, and one of the mistresses basically says, yeah, there's a guy in uniform asking for you. He's basically here, and his name is Jonah. And in the corner we see Lestat fucking around with Antoinette, and he's watching Jonah and Louis have this conversation or this meet and greet, this meetup or whatever it is, and it's so obvious that this dude is not okay. but okay, like, but he watches from afar as Antoinette's basically all over him, kissing him and whatnot, and Louis and Jonah is basically catching up, and Jonah is asking about his family and et cetera, and how his brother Paul had died in that first episode, and just basically trying to catch up with him, and talking about how he's going off to war now. He's dressed up in his uniform or suits or whatever, and they start talking about the past and how they used to be, and et cetera, and definitely it seems that these two are old friends, and it seems like they go back a ways. And in watching it a second time, like, what basically goes down between them. But I guess the first time I was wondering, like, is he, an old like flame, old boyfriend or something like that of Lestat, and Lestat basically takes him out to the bayou. Going out there to the bayou. was that an accent? That probably wasn't the proper accent right down there. Come on now. Yeah, that's exactly the way they talk. Right there in the bayou. All right, let me quit it. Get on with this episode. So they go out to this bayou and they start talking to one another about again, like the things and like the old days, and how Louis done came up. He done came up. He done come up, and he's a respected businessman now, and talk about the past stuff. So obviously, like this is an old friend who he's known him for like quite some time, and he obviously used to be close with him, because they start getting closer and closer. And it's like, this is when it kind of starts to kind of confirm. It's like, they used to be a thing, or they used to be like together. And Louis starts coming on to him a little bit, but I gotta say that I respect Louis. You can tell that Louis, he might be a vampire, and like, besides the whole like not killing people and like only feeding off of animals and stuff, you can tell, like, I mean, Louis has a decent moral compass, or a decent moral way of thinking, because he tells him straight up, he's like, yo, I got someone, I'm with someone, and then he's kind of like, oh, I don't see no ring. It's like, oh, it's not a woman. It's like, oh, it's like, how is he? And Louis basically tells him that he's involved, and that things are okay, but they have like, it seems like basically tells him straight up, it's like that they have an arrangement. And so hearing that, the guy's kind of like, oh, open invitation, basically. And they started to get together, and they start to, do the physical things. And like, basically, in this moment, Louis is having trouble controlling his vampiric nature, as the other guy, Jonah or whatever, is going down on him. And he's fighting back. You can tell, like, he's fighting about these like carnal, animalistic, vampiric nature of maybe like wanting to kill him and being violent. So he starts biting his hand, and furthermore to fight against his, vampiric nature. Yeah. Yeah, and then like when Lestat, when he goes home, he talks to, he starts talking to Lestat, and he starts talking to him about basically his old love. And again, guys, you can see that this dude is bothered by it. Like, who wouldn't be realistically? Like, if you're with someone that doesn't matter, gay, straight, bi, whatever it is, kind of relationship, you're getting kind of like romantic relationship, and it's actually real. It's gonna bother you. It's gonna bother you to an extent, even if it's only to a little extent. If he sees it, it's gonna bother you. Anyway, so as they talk about this, sorry about that. So as they talk about this, the Louis, Lestat basically questions Louis. Lestat basically informs Louis that, like, Antoinette gonna kill her soon or whatever it is. And Lestat actually asks Louis to lock them in. And as Louis is about to lock them in, he sees muddy boots in the corner. And he starts to question, we flash back to with Daniel in the present day with him and Daniel having the conversation, and it's basically that question of, okay, well, why were there muddy boots in the corner? Was he out there in the bayou in the mud when he was when you were out there with the guy that was going on and whatever it is? It just brings about the question of like, was he spying on them while they were having their intimate moment, or while they were going about. But this next scene that I thought was actually really, really interesting and was actually really, really cool, was that after this long time now, Louis goes back home. Louis comes home for another visit, and he runs into his mom and his ma. He runs into his ma. Mama. He runs into his mama. That's what you call it in the South in the show. It's so funny. So running into his mama, he running into his mama. We hadn't seen, apparently, like, his ma is telling him they haven't seen the family in 6 months, and they just show up during the dark or whatever it is. And he only shows up during the night, and his mom tells him basically that, hey, that this isn't your home anymore, because you haven't seen us in 6 months. And Louis is kind of like, well, I mean, I own the place. What are you talking about? I own this place. Like, of course, because it's my home. Like, my name's on the lease. You know what I mean? You can't stop me or whatever it is. And I like how Grace's his brother-in-law and his sister's husband comes out and is kind of like, hey, like, what's going on there? Is everything okay? And he's like, yeah, no, everything is fine. And then that's what Louis basically says. I just came to give the girls a gift or whatever it is. And his mom calls his son-in-law actually son, and then Louis kind of looks at her as like, son, I'm your son. Now move, get out of my way or whatever it is. And this whole exchange was just, again, contrasting the life he had to the life that he had to the life that he has now, and how things are so different. And the scene when he's like, he pushes him out of the way and he kicks in the door, that was some like real vampire shit. Like, that effect, that was so subtle. That's some shit that I really, really like about this show, that like showed like when they actually do the vampire like strength thing, like that's That was so cool. Like, and he kicked in the door. And one of the girls could have basically, because they ran inside when they first saw him, they were like, "Oh my God, there's a ghost," or whatever it is, and they act like children on it because he was basically explaining that because it had been so long, the twins are basically grown up now. If you remember from those episodes ago, that they were just babies, but the twins are actually grown up now, and seeing him not age while other people around him age, the twins probably saw other people around them age and get older, but they didn't really notice that Louis wasn't getting older and Louis wasn't aging. And well, they call him ghosts, and they run inside the house, and they are basically they're kind of afraid of him, and Louis getting so mad, and he just wants to basically see them. He kicks the door, and the door goes flying off the hinges. That effect was so cool, and this door when it got kicked in. When you kick in a door, like the door just goes flying in, but he kicked the door off the hinges, dude. Like both doors. And it goes flipping and flopping all inside of the house. And again, one of the girls could have basically gotten hurt, and he probably wouldn't have felt too great about that shit. And they basically ran away from him. And they just saw that the evident vampiric display of his vampiric nature, his vampirism, basically right there and then. And his mom basically confirming that, yeah, and he says there he is, i.e. not Louis. They're referring to him as a basically a demon, something otherworldly, essentially. So that connection to his human, life, or his previous human life, directly cut off for that. When Grace basically shouts, "Get out!" But yeah, it just further pushes him towards this new world of him being a vampire and him having to leave his human side behind. So Louis comes back and he finds that Lestat is having a party. He's having a party with all of these soldiers, all of these soldiers that are headed off to war. And what had happened was essentially that his place of business where they were initially, where all the soldiers were initially, the reason that they were at this house in the first place is because the power got shut off. And the power got shut off because of this new court order that Louis has to basically move his business elsewhere because all of the white owned businesses are essentially pushing out all the black ones, and they're trying to make the establishment of a certain kind. And again, we see Lestat and Louis basically have a little bit of a tiff. And somehow he presents these vampiric powers of, telling them to basically leave the house. And this telekinesis of getting inside of their heads and being like, okay, everybody go home, the party's over, or whatever it is. And it's funny because everybody's just talking, having a good time, and everybody just stopped and just fucked off out of the house. I have never seen this with vampires. I've never seen, we walking in dreams and talking in dreams and communicating with people in dreams and stuff is farthest I've ever seen with the unconscious mind when it comes to technically vampires. So this show just takes things to another level. I've never seen that before. I mean, we've seen telekinesis from other people or other things, but the way that they did it and the way that they made it seem very creepy, was something definitely that mass compulsion, we've seen compulsion before, Vampire Diaries. We've never seen mass telekinetic compulsion take place. And that was, to me, I think, pretty cool. Yeah. So they go to have this talk with another alderman, by the way, another alderman, basically tell him that has been telling him that, like, listen, like, this what's happening to you, because his business is crumbling. It's taking effect because they're bringing in they're trying to clean up the whole Louisiana and make it hospitable, pimpless, whoreless, clean, pristine kind of shop. Kind of, the like district, but he compares other businesses who have like fronts, like sandwich shops or whatever it is, to say that they can still do all the drinking, whoring, and gambling that they want on the street. Because he basically, essentially, he's comparing his place of business, that was black owned and has black prostitutes and black people in it. It's a black business, and its main source of income being compared to those of the whites. And the whites were basically, in a nutshell, at least from what I gather from watching this, that they were just pushing them out. They were just saying that, hey, you can't necessarily have this place of business here anymore. And one of the alderman gentlemen who was spearheading this, he was reading his mind at the same time, and he, again, just disrespecting Louis, being a bigot, being a racist, degrading him in every kind of way in his head, and being just being horrible because he felt that he's basically better than Louis. And Louis' retaliation was to basically put up a sign, was to say, like, colored only inside of the new club that he had, that he was trying to open. But the police came, and then again, like, just more and more acts and provocations of, like, racism, because it's kind of like when he put this sign up, it's funny that he got a note from the police basically saying that this establishment cannot no longer function because of blah blah whatever it is, and it's a rundown, it's not fit for business, and he's like, because of the broken windows and X, Y, and Z or whatever, and Louis is kind of like, wait, what broken windows are you talking about? What broken windows? And the cop just like pulls out his baton and just breaks the window. Just like high class bullshit racism, man. Yeah. Anyway, so another epic scene though, I think was essentially when Louis comes by the alderman's house, and just very, very, this is so good, and I feel like this is true in the niche world of vampirism, showing true vampirism like capabilities. Like, it was so cool, like how he just appears first of all to the alderman, and like when we see him there, we all know what he's gonna do. Like, we all know what's coming. Like, we all know that this guy's done. It's over for him. It's over. Like, he's been messing with him. He's been trying to ruin his business. And Louis even questioned the first day, because this is the guy that they allowed to buy the district from in the first place, the first district, the club from in the first place on the main street. So he questions that the only reason that he allowed him to buy it in the first place was so that he could sell it so he could buy it back from him, his 15% or his percentage later on down the line. And I mean, I can't necessarily say that he deserved, this, what happened to him, this murdering. Can't say he deserved this, but I guess what we can say is that we saw it coming. Definitely 110% we saw it coming. It seems like for sure that he had just like essentially set him up. And what I loved about this scene was like the line, he's like, and he shoots him. He's like, you best walk away or whatever it is, and he pulls out the gun and he points it towards Louis. The Alderman points it towards Louis and he shoots him. And like Louis looks so annoyed at the fact that he's just he's gonna like shit. Well, shit, my suit's ruined, but like I'm here to murder you, so like it's fine. It's like no more facades, no more playing nice human or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's time to do some vampire shit. And he's just like, so he gets shot. And he's just like, and he looks at it and he's like, he looks so annoyed. And he looks back at him. He's like, oh no, I'll let you reload. It's fine. Like. And it's so funny, like he goes to actually reload and he tries to reload, and Louis just watches him for like a good probably like a couple of seconds as he does it, and he does his vampiric speed and cuts off his ear, and now he's like bleeding, and he slashes him on the face, so he tortures him a little bit before he dies. And how they just even described it in the show, he hadn't even said the words to himself yet, and the Alderman asks him, what is he? And Louis' response is like, I'm a vampire. And we fade to black, and then in the next scene we see the Alderman's body all mangled and charred up on the gates of what it seems like to be a church and public display. And at this point it seems like this was like a war had broken out between, on the main street of Louisiana's district. Alderman Fenwick was murdered. They posted it in the news, and everybody was up in arms about it, which basically caused these rioting and looting in the street. This has caused mass chaos throughout the district, throughout the streets of Louisiana. And Louis and Lestat they cut back to Louis and Lestat, and they started to have a conversation about how he basically enjoyed killing the Alderman. He enjoyed putting him on public display. He enjoyed he enjoyed all of it. He enjoyed the fact that he could embrace his vampiric nature. And Lestat saw this, and Lestat was trying to get him to convince him to accept this basic part of him and accept that he is essentially this way. This is a part of his nature. Like the title of the title of the episode might be acknowledged. It's pretty apt of the title. It's pretty apt. So anyway, Louis goes into the street because he felt like he caused this chaos because he killed the Alderman in the first place. It says a chain reaction, domino effect. He felt like he feels responsible for all the chaos and all the burning and looting in the streets that's essentially happening within the district, or the black district that happens within I don't think it was just specifically the district, but I think it was just like this main district of where they operated particular businesses and etc. And this is where we find Louis finds, or he tries to help anybody in the streets, but this is where he finds a voice in the distance, and he's crying out for help, and he hears this girl screaming, help, or help me, or whatever it is, and he could hear like her heartbeat and the sound of her voice. And that same kick that he used to kick in the door off the hinges of these two thick doors, by the way, off his mother's and his sister's place. He goes into this burning building from where he hears his voice, and he kicks it in, and he jumps over all of the fallen debris just to save this girl. And then the episode ends. But that was episode 3 of Interview with the Vampire. And this week's episode was okay. But you know what? Let's hear from Linda. Linda, can we get the on-review score?
On review, Interview with a Vampire Episode 3 receives a 3 out of 5.
As always, guys, can't forget to do Ash's favorite scenes, of course, which before we leave. Ash's top 3 scenes for this episode definitely were it had to have been the first scene was definitely the scene where I think we got to talk about as well. He kicked in the door and he met his mom and his sister who he hadn't probably seen for a very long time. Like that scene was pretty cool. That scene was pretty like just to see that door like kicked in and like get flown all over the place. That was so cool. And the basic shock of that, and I guess that's the severing of his old human life, being long gone, and like a remnants, almost like a remnant of the past. Everybody was older now. The kids and babies are growing up. Like his mom looked like really, really old, and like it shows the transitional part of that. My next favorite scene, but actually, what should have been my first scene was when he starts Lestat playing the piano, and he talked to the pianist about the wet dick singer. It's pretty good. Again, that was just a really beautiful moment of showing that our differences bring us together in terms of like music, and that's really important and special. I think, at least to me, human communication, man. I think that's definitely, that stuff is important. And I think the other one of my other favorite scenes were the killing of the alderman. Like just the fact that it's like poof, like he got shot, and again he just looks so annoyed. It's like, it's fine, I'll let you reload. It's fine, I'll let you reload. And as he tries to reload, scrambling about, he just cuts off his ear. Man, it's just you knew he was gonna die. You know what he was there for. Like, very intense, very good scene. And bonus scene is, I guess, like Louis going into that fire and jumping over debris to save the girl. Yeah. So all in all, definitely a good episode, I think. But anyway, guys, it's gonna basically do it for me. I've been Ash here for On Review Podcast. Thank you for listening. Definitely make sure to hit us up on our socials, the Facebook, the Instagram, the Twitter. Make sure to leave us a like and tell us about what you thought about the episodes in the comments of YouTube. And lastly, guys, don't forget, be safe, be kind, be you. Take care.